Ramaphosa's final leg of his state visit he started in Nigeria, and then it was Saudi Arabia yesterday, and just now the Arab Emirates in the Middle East. For this, we are joined on the line by Hubert Danso. He's the CEO and Vice Chairman of Africa Investor. Hubert, welcome and thanks for making the time. We started talking to you when the President's travels started in Nigeria. Let's just recap on that a bit. The President's address to the African Export-Import Bank, Afrixim, and the significance of that.
Yes, well, thank you, Desiree, and good morning, South Africa. The President had, from what we can tell, a very successful visit. And as you may know, the government and his administration have really made some very positive and practical steps to deepen their relationship with the African Export-Import Bank. So it was a great opportunity for the President to give the keynote address at the 25th anniversary of Afrixim. I think, as you may know, the President is very committed to, for all the right reasons, the continental free trade area. As you know, it's a 39 trillion rand market, and that's where a lot of the growth for the continent is going to come from. And he highlighted some very clear and specific points to make that strong case in his address during the AGM. So, and he also encouraged, very charismatically, President Buhari to do all the consultation that he needs to do, but please land at a place, where his signature would hopefully join over 40 other African heads of state in ratifying and taking forward the continental free trade area. That message came through very clearly.
The Nigerian Finance Minister, Kemi Adeo's son, though, expressed some reservations about the Nigerian business community's commitment to signing the free trade area agreement. Did you get a sense of commitment from your counterparts that you interacted with while you were there?
Yes, I think that it's all a matter of interpretation. I think the key issue that was raised by the Minister of Finance was really that there needs to be proper consultation. And in the absence of consultation, there's reservation because there's not enough information that's properly understood to engage the local industrial community and the organized business sector to really understand where the benefits are. I think we have to appreciate that South Africa's economy is very industrialized, and it's got a very small base of the sort of informal sector when compared to Nigeria, which is quite the reverse, which has a very large informal sector and a very sort of small, sophisticated industrial base. So it's very different messages and very different levels of consultation that need to take place. But I do believe we're getting there, because one of the reasons I started off by saying this has been a successful trip is because you may have noted that following President Ramaphosa's meeting with President Buhari, he's made a very clear statement that he intends to sign the Continental Free Trade Area soon. And that was not an indication that was received prior to President Ramaphosa's visit.
Thereafter, President Ramaphosa moved on to Saudi Arabia and now the Arab Emirates. What's your analysis of the country moving in between countries that are mainly oil producers and are members of OPEC?
Well, if you look at it, I mean, even in the Nigerian context, if you look at South African exports to Nigeria, we're talking about, 5.7 billion rands worth of exports against imports in the region of 22 billion rand. So you can already see between South Africa and Nigeria there's a significant deficit. Why is there a deficit? There's a deficit because of the petroleum imports. So naturally there's a great sensitivity there and an opportunity for South Africa to work on an industrial basis with Nigeria and to really work with the oil and gas sector. Now, it's no coincidence that you're now going to some of the largest oil-producing markets and most influential players on that sector for negotiation. So I think that sort of symbolizes a lot of the significance around South Africa's need to reach out and have better economic relations, and of course also have a more of an engagement and influence over some of the oil prices where there's larger dependency. I think we're already beginning to feel a bit of the pinch right now in terms of the high cost of this resource.
Now, Saudi Arabia committed $10 billion towards South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's investment drive yesterday. Should we be optimistic about this?
I think we should be optimistic that when another market is prepared to invest in you, it's a large show of confidence. I think we should be optimistic about the administration's ability to ensure that this acts as a sustainable catalyst for jobs and economic growth in the market. But of course, all of these things, they come with their own strings. We have to look much more closely at the detail. But I think overall, just in terms of the type of stimulus that's required on the job creation front and the economic growth front, I think it's definitely going to be a meaningful investment.
So Africa Invest studies continental economies throughout the 54 countries. What is your sense of the Continental Free Trade Agreement? Is it viable?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's long overdue. It's very viable, and it's going to be catalytic to proportions that we haven't seen. That does not mean that it won't come without its own complications. There's a lot of socializing still to do. Some markets will gain more than others, and I think we have to sort of create this rising tide lifts all dynamic. But it's really causing markets to really understand the strengths and the weaknesses, but rather to see those as opportunities. So, for example, as you know, we represent some of the largest institutional investors, representing over $40 trillion worth of assets and investment capital around the world. Already, just on the back of the continental free trade area and the relationship between South Africa and Nigeria, we've already been able to put together a $400 million South Africa-Nigeria industrialization fund, which will basically be able to provide capital to assist South African businesses invest in their operations in Nigeria to create more industrialization in Nigeria, which will also have the impact of creating more growth and employment back home. Now, these types of dynamics wouldn't really have had the same impact or impetus in the absence of the likes of a continental free trade area. And then, of course, when you begin to look at a South Africa and a Nigeria working in step economically as well as politically, that will also send a very strong message and create numerous opportunities for BRICS. And the story goes on, because as we look at the geopolitics of the global trading system and the increasing protectionism, this is the right time for the continent to provide leadership as the largest free trade area in the world and really build out intra-African trade. I mean, some say that, well, 12% is a very low level. It's a low level if you see that as a problem. It's a huge opportunity if you can see that there are lots of opportunities between African countries to trade and invest amongst themselves. I mean, if you think that 12% is low for intra-African trade, or 15 or 16, depending on whose research you believe, look at the fact that there's only probably about 5 to 7% of intra-African investment. So we're working from a base now where if we bring our institutional investment community together, the SMEs and the corporates and the economic policy making, it's an unprecedented opportunity for the continent.
Hubert, you touched on it a bit. In about 2 weeks' time, South Africa will have a massive showcase, the BRICS Summit, with all the leaders of the members of the gathering coming together here in South Africa. Does this trip, this three-nation trip, strengthen President Cyril Ramaphosa going into that summit?
I think the success that he's had engaging and addressing some of the sort of social as well as economic issues with the administration and President Buhari is certainly going to strengthen him going into BRICS. I think South Africa has always been very, very clear that it sees its membership in BRICS as the catalyst and being at the forefront of really not only bringing South Africa into the BRICS family, but also South Africa being the gateway into the rest of the continent. And once you can have a Nigeria on side for that, it's really going to be a very, very powerful dynamic. And then on top of that, you're seeing the financing institutions like Afrexim. So South Africa has made some under President Ramaphosa's leadership, some very dynamic moves in terms of strengthening its relationship with Afrexim. So you've seen this year alone that South Africa is now a shareholder and a board member of Afrexim, which has never happened before, for the first time. You've seen in the last 2 weeks that South Africa, through the Export Credit Insurance Corporation, ECIC, has put together a $1 billion platform, the South Africa Trade and Investment Promotion Program, that will help South African companies and fund and support South African companies with facilities to trade into the rest of Africa.
Hubert, this is where we're going to leave it, but thank you so much for your time. Hubert Danso is the CEO of Africa Investor, and he was also accompanying the South African delegation during the Nigerian leg of President Ramaphosa's three-nation trip.